Alright, so today I'll be covering the Audio Technica AT6006R, Tonearm safety razor, and the Little Fwend, specifically the Disco model, Little Fwend lifter for Technics 1200. It's called the Disco model. I picked this one up, the Audio Technica I picked up from Amazon. It was a little bit under $100, and then the Little Fwend I got from turntablelab.com. It was about $200, big price difference. After trying them both, I'm going to stick with the Little Fwend. I'll show you why when I go through that, but they have the same mechanism. This one's got a base that slides into this way. This one's got a base that kind of sticks out this way. So let's get into that. I'll show you how these fit on the PLX-CRSS12. And yes, they both do fit. They both work great depending on your needs. My current situation is my turntable is at its lowest, and that's why I'm making this video. For anyone else in this trying to figure out whether or not this is going to work, on Amazon this does say it is compatible with the PLX when it is. On their website it specifically says it's not, that it's only for the Technics 1200, etc., etc. I challenged this, and guess what? It works just fine on the PLX-CRSS12. I'll show you that. If you want to just see that, just skip to the other side of the video. But you should take a look at both, because this one fits just fine. It fits in the space between the Tonearm and the platter just fine, and it costs less than half. So if you've got a cartridge where you've had to lift your Tonearm pretty high, about 2 millimeters or higher, this is going to get the job done just fine. If you're using just a butter rug like I am, or your Tonearm is at its lowest height, the Little Fwend is going to be the one that's going to work for you. However, if you do have the Tonearm at its lowest height, you can make this work, and that's exactly what I'm going to cover and how. All right, let's get into it. All right, so this is the Audio Technica AT6006R. In short, yes, it works. I have it installed there. You can see I have it installed without the thing here. And the reason for that is, in my situation, my Tonearm is at its lowest height, because that is where, based on the needle I'm using, that's where the Tonearm is level with the record. So I really don't have a choice. I have to use it at the lowest setting. If you have another needle where you have had to raise this higher, you might even be able to get away with, you should be able to get away with using this just fine. So this does fit in the space here, so don't worry about that. I was able to put it in there, but because of the height I just couldn't get it to work, so I decided to try it without taking it off. It comes with these adhesives here, and this adhesive is meant to stick to the bottom of this base. So when I stuck it to this, I just used an X-Acto knife to cut around the circular shape of what I needed, and it stayed there. I'm pretty happy with it. It's pretty sturdy on. You can lock it and load it pretty often, and it stays on. So the adhesive is great. But what I will say, because of my situation where this is at its lowest height, there are situations it won't work. So I'm going to cover DJing, scratching or mixing, as well as just listening, if you're just listening for fun. So my ideal situation would have been to be able to use it like it was before, with just the butter rug here. However, that doesn't work. Why? Because the height is too low. So if you scratch with a butter rug and you have it set like this, you're probably going to hear this. I'd set it somewhere in the middle as it's tracking. It's here, you can hear it. It's stuck. Why? Because the height it's hitting the beam, and it's just stuck there. So that's not going to work. So what I found, though, what does work and what gives you enough height is to put the stock slip mat. So let me do that. You got the wax paper, put the stock slip mat, put the butter rug on top, and now let's see how this goes. So I'm putting this here, putting that. you are DJing, so you don't want to use the macro clamp. And I'm gonna note I have this at the heavy setting just for this demonstration because it flattens out the record the most and it covers what I want to show. So now I have the added stock slip mat with the butter rug and my record. And now let's see what happens when I put it towards the end here. That's working. So let me get it onto the groove lock. And this is after a lot of trial and error, but you can see it's tracking towards the end and bam, hits the groove lock, comes on. So if you are DJing, you can, you're gonna have to add some height if you're using a butter rug. It does work with just the stock slip mat. I'll show you right now just to confirm. But if you're using just a butter rug, it's not gonna work because it doesn't give you the height that you need. And when you are DJing, the other thing you can do that I like to do, since you don't actually need this to work, right, is you can lift it and you can actually rotate it away over here. So now you don't have to, you know, if you're scratching somewhere out here and you accidentally bump the lever, it's not gonna come up. But it actually still works if you, let me get it towards the end of the record again. So it's tracking again. You know, this is in case like you're mixing and that last record you're playing happens to be at the end of the record, and it's there where you just saw. It still works, it'll still lift it, but when you're like scratching and DJing just to have it out of the way, it is nice that you can just rotate it out of the way and not have to worry about it as much unless you are playing a record that goes all the way to here. So that's that for DJing. And just to show you, if you only have the stock, slip mat, I don't think it works. It works at the, I don't think it works because I just did it. So again, macro clamp at its heaviest setting. I have this out of the way just for demonstration anyway. But so we're going to the, let me get to the groove lock. Yeah. So let's see if this works. So there you go. See, it gets stuck. It's not gonna move. It hits the beam and it's just stuck. It's never gonna get there. It's never going to get lifted. So if you're DJing and you have a record that goes this far, you run the chance of your record starting to skip while you're trying to mix the one on the other deck. So if you're using the stock slip mat, the one that comes with the Cross 12, you might want to add another felt mat, just one more to get that little bit extra height, as you saw. That'll work for you, and then it won't get stuck. But what I did find is, again, as I mentioned, it was on the heaviest setting. I believe if it doesn't happen if you have it at the quote unquote default setting, which is all the arrows line up here. So I believe if you have it like that, and let me try it, because it doesn't flatten the record as much, you know, gives the record some give. Let me put this on the groove lock again. See, it actually tracks and goes all the way. So if you are someone that uses it light or uses it at the default, as long as you don't go super heavy, you can get away with just using the stock slip mat that comes with the Cross 12. So it is just a question of, you know, where you have this. I sometimes have it at heavy, and I like to, you know, not run into any problems in any kind of situation. So in order for me to achieve that is to put that extra butter rug underneath. That way, when I am DJing, whether it's mixing or scratching, I don't have to worry about the Tonearm getting stuck on the Tonearm lifter here. And I do have it moved out of the way. Again, I have the butter rug underneath, and then, whoops, have that again on the heavy setting, pushing this down. And now you'll see that even at the heavy setting, just like I previously had, okay, it's on the groove lock. Because of the fact that I added that butter rug, it's gonna track all the way and it's gonna work just fine. So that is your DJing situation. And So for DJing, if you are mixing or scratching, it will work. If your tone arm is at its lowest height, this is what you're going to have to do in order for it to work. If you have a needle that has had you raise this to the 1.5 millimeter, 2 millimeter or higher, you're not going to have these issues. You can probably leave the beam as is the other way here, you know, the way that you normally have it, because your tone arm is always going to be your tone arm is always going to be well above the beam here, so you don't even have to worry about that. If you're using these Little needles and you're at the lowest height or whatever needle, you're going to have to give it a little height here, and I did that just by adding the stock slip mat with my butter rug, and I am good to go. So that is that when it comes to DJing, mixing or scratching. Things to keep in mind, but it does work just like that. It fits in the space there. So when it comes to listening, just straight listening, just playing a vinyl record, not touching the mixer, not mixing, not scratching, just playing from beginning to end, I like to use a acrylic slip mat or a leather one. I have the leather one coming soon. I'm going to try both of those out, but these automatically add way more height than you need. So your problems are basically resolved if you're just using this to listen to and you want to have this, especially because you're just listening to it, you want to have this work every single time in case you forget, you fall asleep. You want this to lift your record in that situation, right? So what I've gone ahead and done is actually what has worked is I can, rather than having to switch out all the time, I can keep the stock slip mat, the butter rug, and I can just put the acrylic slip mat right on top, and that works. And then you know, the record on top, and that works too. And then just use the magnet clamp to hold it in place. Believe doesn't, I mean, you're just listening to it, so you can just kind of play around with whatever's going to work for you here. But yeah, as you can see, I can definitely have a little extra added height. I can leave the beam where it's at. I'm going to move this towards the groove locks. There's a locked groove. You can see it's tracking towards the end of the record. No problems there. Just gonna make it all the way and bam, come up. No problem, no issues. Why? Because even though the tone arm is at its lowest height, by using it this way without, you know, this extra part, you have enough clearance between the tone arm and the beam for it to track all the way. Especially with that added height, it kind of raises the space. I don't think you can get a good look here, but there's much more clearance between the beam and the tone arm here for listening, so you don't have to worry about getting stuck like you saw, because the extra height that you've added here helps lift the tone arm just slightly above the space that you need, and you're always going to have clearance, so you don't have to worry about it. So that's great. And also, to that point, I know you saw me put the acrylic slip mat over the stock mat and the butter rug, but if you just put it with just the acrylic slip mat, so you got the wax paper there, and then just the acrylic slip mat with the record over it. Just that third. Just for demonstration, put it on the heavy setting, but that also gives you more than enough height to use this tone arm lifter. It works just fine. You definitely, there's way more than enough clearance between the beam and the tone arm, so you also don't have to worry about it again. But the problem is this is for just straight listening. If you are DJing, it's tracking the groove again just to show you. It is on the heavy setting and it is not going to get stuck. Why? Because that thick acrylic slip mat gives it more than enough clearance for the tone arm to track, so no issues there. So for straight listening, you can just use, you don't need to put things under it, you can just use the acrylic mat. It works just fine. Just for me, it's rather than having to interchange the stock mat and butter rug with the acrylic mat, I just slap the acrylic mat up top. Sounds just fine for me. And finally, I have this leather slip mat that just came in. It's from Jake's Turntables. It's advertised as anti-static, which is the main reason I bought it. So I'd probably get rid of the acrylic slip mat. It is also pretty thick. So with just the leather slip mat on here and the record, also on the heavy setting, because remember that's where it would get stuck. It doesn't really matter because wherever you put the needle, look at the spacing between the beam and the tone arm, there is more than enough. There's clearance, like I can see it, you probably can't see it, but there's clearance all the way through. So that one works just fine. So for leather over acrylic, this leather one will work just fine. Give you more than enough clearance. Again, just for straight listening, not for DJing. So the tone arm lifter will work. You're straight listening to it. You want the tone arm to lift, it'll work with only the acrylic slip mat or only this leather slip mat because they're just as thick. If you want to use the stock slip mat and or butter rug, you do want to get that extra height by putting them both together. If you use the stock slip mat only, it could get stuck. If you have your Magville clamp set to the heavy setting, you might be okay. If you have it set to the regular setting where those other things are. And again, this is only if your tone arm is set to the lowest. If it's higher, you're probably not going to run into these issues. So now that I've taken it off, I did want to show you that that other piece that slides in does fit in the spacing between the PLX. So if your tone arm is raised higher and you can get the clearance for it, this one will work just fine. You can use this, the adhesive will stick onto the bottom base here, and it fits perfectly in between the space. Then you just really got to fine tune where you're going to put the lever, and then then you're good to go. So just wanted to show you that it does fit in the space. So this could work for you if you've got a cartridge that has your tone arm lifted higher, you have enough clearance, this will work just fine. If you have your tone arm at very low and you just want to use a butter rug or a very thin felt mat, this is not going to give you the clearance that you want, nor is it going to give it to you if you only use it with just this piece like I did earlier in the video. So this isn't going to work for you if you do that. However, the Little Fwend will. So there you go. And again, my tone arm is at its lowest height. That is where it is level. The tone arm is level with the record. So I can't raise it any higher if I wanted to. So in order to make this work, and I believe, let me just do this now just to test in case you wouldn't just use just an acrylic. So again, if you're just listening, I recommend if you're just listening, of course, as you saw, it will work with just, take this off. If you are just listening, you don't use this stuff like I do. The reason I use that for listening is because the butter rugs cause so much static and they get stuck to the record. So if I'm just listening, it's annoying. So I'd rather just use acrylics. Does have some static, but not as much. But if you are using just the stock slip mat with another felt mat underneath, you're also good to go if you are just listening. For me, it's just a personal preference because I don't want to deal with the static every time, especially this record where you have to change it every 9 minutes. You can see it's tracking just fine, and bam, it hits it, works just fine. And the other thing I'll point out is my lifter here goes absurdly high, as you can see, really high, because I wanted to make sure that it goes well above the beam of the lifter here. So you can't see it, but I do have some clearance between here and there when I lift it, because that way now I can just, slide it this way, back and forth if I need to, or if it slips or whatever. And I don't cause any friction between the beam and the tone arm, because what I noticed is if you leave this at the default setting, sure, it'll raise it. However, once the tone arm lifter raises it, even if you lift this, it's still going to be it's still going to be resting on the tone arm lifter. So if you start to move it, you're causing friction. And that to me is, you know, you're going to start to nudge it here and there, and eventually it's going to give, and that adhesive is just going to fall off. I want to deal with that. So that's why I have this lifting absurdly high, so that I have the freedom of kind of moving this where I want without causing any friction on the tone arm lifter, and not have to worry about it being knocked over or anything like that. Some tips for installing it. The main thing, your goal here is you're trying to get the lever, let's see, parallel to the tone arm when it hits the groove lock, so that when it hits, you know, it works. That's really your main goal. So what I did was took a lot of trial and error, but one tip I will say to use is once you find the location without, you know, the adhesive, mark it with a pencil. You can still see the mark I just did there. Mark it with a pencil, and that's kind of sort of where either where the tone arm is when it hits the groove lock, and where you're going to want to put the lever. Mark it with a pencil, and even you can even go around and draw the shape of the cylinder on there with that same pencil, so that you kind of get a fine-tuned area of where you're going to place it. It does take some trial and error after I put the adhesive on. You can pull it off and, you know, find a new place to stick it to. I probably stuck and unstuck it with the adhesive like 20-30 times, and it's, you know, once I finally found the home, just pressed it in place, and it's been holding. It is sensitive, you know, it's just tape, so you can knock it over, so just be very careful. I mean, it's you know, it's a normal thing unless you want to glue it, but otherwise, as long as you're careful, you know, your record doesn't slip forward and knocks it over, or you don't like accidentally get caught in between the space in between the, you know, the rest and this part, and like knock it over. That's also another reason why I have this going super high, so that I don't have to worry about you know, getting in between that space and knocking it over. So use a pencil to mark it. That works. The adhesive, and then the adhesive, it's okay if you mess up, you know, pull it back up, find the right spot. Again, trial and error. It's going to take you some time, but it can be done. So, and you can, if you're going to listen to it or mix with DJing, it works with the stocks. Jeez. Works with the stock slip mat plus the butter rug or any other felt slip mat. And that will give you the height that you need when your tone arm is at its lowest height. Again, just to, because now I forgot what I said earlier, is does it work with, yeah, that was it. So if you're using the stock slip mat and you use it at, if you're using just the stock slip mat, so I took off the butter rug, this is just the stock slip mat and the wax paper that the cross stove comes with. If I use it at the default tension setting, it should do just fine. Let's see. Yeah, so it's tracking that. Let's see if it goes all the way. And yeah, looks like it's gonna go just fine. That works great. But if you have a really old record, or a record that's warped, and you might get a better sound out of it by using this really, really tight, you will probably get stuck. There you go. So it gets stuck there. I guess it has to do with the shape of the record. You know, you're using the heavy setting with just the stock slip mat, and that's why, for me to avoid this situation completely, I added the butter rug. But if you don't use it, if all your records are fine, you can use it at the default torque or tension setting or whatever it's called, and you should be good. You should be okay. You shouldn't need the felt mat. But again, just to add that little height, that's what I added the butter rug for. And for straight listening though, without no mixing, no DJing, just straight listening, I added the acrylic slip mat, because it doesn't cause as much static, it doesn't stick to the record as much as the butter rug does, and it gives more than enough height. Where are we at? It gives the record much more than enough height for it to for it to have enough clearance between the beam and the tonearm. I'm not sure you can see it, but it's there. And I don't have to worry about it. And then the last tip is back to in a DJing situation, if you want to just forget about it, you can always just rotate this away to go that way. The only thing you need to keep in mind is make sure that you have this set so that it doesn't, make sure you have enough height so that when you get, if you're playing a record that's towards the inner, you know, the inner part of the record, it doesn't get stuck here when you're DJing, because it will skip, it'll get stuck. But the main thing is make sure you got enough height on the record. And again, this is if your tonearm is at its lowest height, which is where I'm at, because that's where it's level with the record. If you have this raised at 1.5 millimeter, 2 millimeter or higher, you should be okay. You probably won't deal with any of this. You might even be able to use just the butter rug. Good for you. I'm jealous. I might change the needle just because of that, but otherwise everything is set. So next I'm gonna take a look at how the Little Fwend fits. So this is the Little Fwend Disco model, designed specifically for the Technica 1200, quote unquote. It works for the PLX, and we'll go through it a little bit. It's probably going to be keeping this one. It comes like this. It's got the adhesive already there, so you just peel it back. And it is 2 pieces, and the way the instructions are set out is basically you position this on the turntable, and then you fine tune this in there, and it's got a little screw here to adjust it with the tiniest little hex key that you've ever seen. And this piece here is essentially the same thing as the Audio Technica piece here, but you know, you do get what you pay for. What I do like about this is that because of this base, you know, it's longer, it's a lot sturdier versus this where I mentioned I had to just stick it on this part because I was using the tonearm at its lowest height. However, with this, I was very happy that I could use the base with this installed in there with just the butter rug, my ideal setup. So anything else that I put on top of that, like the leather slip mat that I mentioned, will work just fine. So this is probably the one I'm going to be keeping with. Well, this is the one I will be keeping. It does cost about twice as much, but you get what you pay for. It's totally worth it. So I'll show you once it's installed. All right, so this is the Little Fwend Disco that I have installed. It's pretty secure on. The adhesive is pretty great. I'm very, very happy with this, especially because it sits so low that I can have my tonearm at its lowest and, you know, only use a butter rug underneath. So I can really get, you know, the slipperiest you can ever want it. It can be done using the Little Fwend, which is pretty great. So a few things that I'll point out here that I did. It is just similar to the Audio Technica. It is a lot of trial and error until you get it right, so just be patient. But it's totally worth it at the end. I will say the adjustments are easier. You can adjust the height, you know, where that's going to sit by using that screw, but it does come with the hex key. So fine tuning it is really easy because, you know, you tighten it and then you just do it really, you just untighten it just a little bit, and then you're able to lift it up or push it left and right until you find the right angle that will, you know, that will hit it once it hits the groove lock. The instructions obviously are set to here. The instructions obviously are set to the how to install it on Technics. You know, that this little part is what's a little bit different on the PLX, so you can see how it's specifically designed to fit nicely there. Mine is not the way I put it. Again, a lot of trial and error, but the way that the instructions have it laid out, you can follow the same thing where you find the best place of the base first, and you take out the adhesive and you stick the base in, and then you slip this part in there, and then, you know, you fine tune it where you want. You can do it that way, but there was something that I came to mind while I was installing it. So what I ended up doing was, before I peeled off the adhesive, I was playing with both ends. With both pieces like this, I would hold one end down while the needle was tracking to make sure that that it was able to hit, because I realized that, so ideally, especially with the techniques, the beam will sit at a 90-degree angle from the lever, right? You can see here it's definitely not not 90 degree. It's pretty close to 180. The instructions tell you that it should be at about 90 degrees. But again, that's if you are installing it on the Techniques turntable. The one thing that I wanted for myself was is if I forget to say, load it, I want to know that at the beginning of the record, not halfway through. Because if you have it at a 90-degree angle, the way that this is set up, say you have this at a 90-degree angle, the way that the beam is gonna be sticking out this way, so your tone arm is gonna crash into the unloaded beam, halfway through, or a quarter way halfway through the record, and then it's just going to get stuck there, right? Because you forgot to load it. So rather than run into that, you are also able to rotate this a little bit. There's two pieces here. This top part is threaded, so you can tighten and loosen it just a little bit. So I was able to tighten it so that loosen it so that it sits, more or less 180 degrees of that lever. And that allowed me to do two things on here. One is, if I do try to load it, and if I do try to, put the needle at the beginning of the record and it's unloaded, here, at the beginning, it stops. Look, it got stuck. See, it's not going to go to the bottom. It's unloaded. It's telling me, hey, you forgot to load it. So I'm going to, make sure I load it, and then I'm good to go. The other thing too is I was able to position this such that in the unlikely case that this slips, oh, it fell, oh my goodness, and I have this down, which you should always have it up, but in the unlikely case where it's down and it accidentally slips or it slips off the beam, I have it positioned such that it actually fits in between, in this little space in between, so that it does get caught and doesn't get ruined by being caught on the platter. So that was a nice thing that I was able to do here, but the only way I was able to do that again was through trial and error, because the direction of the beam is, when you move the beam, you also move the lever. So you have to figure out where can you position the beam so that it, that you can identify that it's unloaded at the beginning of the record, but also when you get to the end at the groove lock, that it is also going to be triggered. Took a lot of trial and error, but again, once I found the right spot, same thing, I used a pencil to mark the space where it would go. Then I took off the adhesive, and then I put it on, and then I did the fine tuning with this, and it worked out this way. The adhesive is really nice, like I mentioned. It's really, really sticky. I think it's a lot stickier than the one that came with the Audio Technica, but I was able to remove it once I did it, so it's not like a one time you messed up, like you have to, the adhesive's not going to work. So if you do mess up, don't be scared, just peel it off gently. It still stays stuck to the bottom of the base. Just peel it off gently. You can reposition it where you need to, and then once you find the sweet spot, you're good to go. The other thing that I really liked about this is because it sits so low, I was able to lower my razor here. So now previously it was absurdly high. Now it's at just a regular level over the needle, which is also really nice. And again, this is with only just using a butter rug. So if I use the leather slip mat or the acrylic slip mat or the stock slip mat, you're guaranteed to make this guaranteed to work. And then the height can be adjusted with that screw in there using that small little hex key that comes with it. Again, I didn't have to because my Tonearm is at its lowest setting, and that's where the butter rug sits. But the way that it works, again, oh, I accidentally forgot to bring this up. Oh, it slips. Oh, snap. Well, that happened because it's loaded. So again, what I really liked is if that I have it set up so that if you forget to load it and this slips, one, it gets caught in between the space, doesn't hit the platter. Two, if I have it unloaded and I try to put it at the beginning of the record, it is not going to go down because it's unloaded. So that will remind me to load it rather than it getting stuck halfway through and then just, you know, start skipping halfway through the record. It's better to do this. So now let me show you this working. So let's do this the right way. You've been watching me doing it the wrong way. You should never do it the way I was doing it earlier in the video, but I'm gonna put this over the load lock here just to make it easier. So there you go, it's tracing. Tracing, hits the groove lock and rises. And the other thing I really liked about the Little Fwend is the rise is not as exaggerated. You can see it's really low. It still stays there. So, you know, it minimizes how much dust will come in. This, again, raises it just fine, looks good. Now putting it away, same thing, take it up. And then, you know, that again is at a reasonable height, and it is enough to clear the space between the tone arm and the beam. So again, if I were to drag it over, I'm dragging it along this, not the beam, although it doesn't matter because, you know, you have a very strong base here. So it's not like you're going to knock it over like the Audio Technica, how I had earlier, right? So now I can just, you know, do the normal thing where you do that, lock it in place and lock that back up. And same thing, I don't have to, if the record slips while I'm removing, I don't have to worry about it. The only thing is, you know, I might bend the lever, but it is what it is, you know, but it's not in the way. You just, it looks like it is, but it's not. So you can, you know, lift your records up and down, no problem. And that's that. I definitely recommend the Little Fwend. It's super nice. It's definitely sits a lot cleaner, a lot nicer. The Audio Technica deal, it is half the price, but you do have a, you know, a shiny silver thing sticking out like this, or this if you do what I do, right? Versus the Little Fwend, which the black just kind of sits flush against the turntable, and you just have the lever there. Yeah, so that's that. You got any questions? Leave a comment. I'll reply as soon as I can, but hopefully this has helped you guys out. It was really bugging me because I like to just crank the volume and go to a whole other part of the house, and when the record ends, you know, rather than have it just spinning with the needle there, I'd rather just have it lift itself up. And this is totally invasive, you know, it doesn't, I can still rotate this up and down if I needed to. Whoa. I can still rotate this up and down if I needed to. There's no issues there. As you saw, the platter is going to spin, no problem. So I really like this. Highly recommend it. It does cost twice as much, but it's totally worth it if, you know, depending on what you're into. But if you don't have the budget, the Audio Technica gets the job done. They're essentially the same mechanism. So if you're okay with that, totally go with the Audio Technica, especially if your cartridge and your toner, you're able to get them up higher. Yes, definitely. I would have probably stuck with the Audio Technica because it costs half as much as the Little Fwend, and you know, it does the exact same thing. However, mine, because if you want to have the lowest, have it sitting at the lowest setting, you know, the Little Fwend is what makes sense for it. And again, I did try it, as you saw things getting stuck, I did try it in the heavy. That doesn't really matter because you have more than enough clearance for this to work. So there's that. Let's put this on the groove lock again. Just kind of set it down gently and going and up. See, right at the groove lock. I've got it right at the groove lock because when it lifts, I can move this out of the way. And I also have it such that if I'm about to reset the record here, it doesn't go down because I positioned the beam such that it gets caught on the tone arm. It's going to take you some trial and error. Totally worth it. I'm very happy with this. All right. I hope that's been helpful. You guys have a good one.